Liz Wheeler Show. We are live right here on X at Liz_Wheeler and on YouTube at youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. If you have not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And I want to start the show today by saying thank you to you. We've had a couple of huge shows this week that have had a huge impact on what's happening in cities across our country, specifically what's happening in Los Angeles with these violent anti-ICE riots that are now being exported to your neighborhood and your city, other states outside of the state of California. So thank you. Thank you for sending the link to yesterday's episode and Monday's episode to your member of Congress. It's making a difference. We have Senator Josh Hawley now calling for an investigation into who is funding the anti-ICE riots out in LA. He is specifically examining the group Chirla. You remember we talked about Chirla on the show yesterday and on Monday. Chirla is a pro-open borders, pro-illegal alien organization who gets the majority of their funding from the taxpayer. In fact, in fiscal year 2023, they got over $30 million, $34 million to be exact, from California state taxpayers. That means the people who are suffering at the hands of these violent anti-ICE riots in LA, they're the ones that paid the group on the ground to commit violence against them. Senator Josh Hawley is calling for documents and evidence to be provided by Chirla, because what Chirla is doing, according to Josh Hawley, is not protected free speech. What they're doing is aiding and abetting in the commission of a crime that's being committed. Kudos to Senator Josh Hawley for calling for that investigation. Over in the House of Representatives, we have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene following our episode on Neville Roy Singham yesterday. She presented a damning case against him as the primary funder of the communist group that we discussed on the show yesterday, PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It's funded by this almost billionaire, Neville Singham. She presented a damning case against him as the primary funder of the PSL group, which is behind organizing the anti-ICE riots in LA. We're going to show you a little bit about what she had to say. Take a look.
Right. And just to go further on who Neville Ray Singham is, he's the son of a Sri Lankan immigrant and Cuban immigrant. But in 1974, he was investigated by the FBI for his ties to groups engaged against the United States interest. He was a member of a Maoist group. He's also said to be nearly a billionaire and gives his money frequently to left-wing organizations. He's even linked to the CCP. He currently lives and works in Shanghai. He shares office space with a Chinese propaganda firm focused on presenting a positive image of China to the global South. And in 2019, he started a consulting business with Chinese partners active in the propaganda apparatus of the CCP. He has provided significant funding to pro-China media outlets around the world, and he even married Jody Evans, the founder of Code Pink, in 2017. She used to be against China, but she's not anymore, and she's currently co-authoring a book titled China is Not Our Enemy. You know what's really interesting about this man is he uses the Goldman Sachs philanthropy fund. There's a lot of Americans invest their money with Goldman Sachs, but the Goldman Sachs philanthropy fund is a dark money clearinghouse to obscure his identity, Singham's identity, while facilitating the transfer of substantial sums to nonprofit. Things like the People's Forum, which received over $20 million from Singham through the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund, organized anti-Israel protests across the country and was heavily involved in the protests at Columbia and the takeover of Hamilton Mall. Singham also funds $20 million through the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Group to the Justice and Education Fund, which provides money to pro-China media outlets around the world. And just as you mentioned, the Party of Socialism and Liberation. That's the group that's organizing these lovely events happening in LA that Democrats call mostly peaceful, but the people in LA call fiery, violent, and call a war against America. He also funded, and unbelievably, the pro-Palestinian protests around the country and on campuses, and Elias Rodriguez, the man who killed the 2 young Israeli diplomats. Singham coordinated the anti-ICE LA protest. Again, this picture just can't be shown enough. And these have been coordinating they have been coordinating these anti-ICE protests around the world, around the country. And more to come is what the Democrats tell us. Mr. Carafano, one last question. Do you believe China is funding the war against America?
There's a lot of activity in the public record that show Chinese money is flowing into many of these organizations which have been involved in planning and organizing and supporting these activities. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Carafano. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
First of all, this is because of you. We are hearing the name Neville Roy Singham on the floor of the United States Congress because of you. Because you shared the episode from yesterday that we did. You shared the episode from Monday. You passed along. You raised your voice. We say this often on the show that we are called in a very unique way to participate in this administration, this presidential administration, something that people in the past historically haven't been called to participate to the level that we are today. We are called not just to raise our voices once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year when there's something happening in Congress that they need our input on or we want to stop. We are called to participate in every minute detail, not just day by day, but hour by hour. And you have stepped up and answered that call, and you can see the result of it on the floor of the House of Representatives, and you should be extremely proud of yourselves. I'm extremely proud of what we're accomplishing. Together. And today we're going to dive more into even more of this. What's interesting is this name of this man, this billionaire, this creep, this guy who's hiding out in communist China with special permission, who's shares an office space with the Chinese Communist Party propaganda firm, who's funding the Communist Party that's staging the violent riots out in LA. We didn't know his name. It wasn't a household name. Like the way that George Soros is, for example. You say the word George Soros, everyone in the Republican Party, everyone in the Democrat Party knows that name. They know that he funds radical leftist progressive groups. They know he was behind the Progressive Prosecutor Project. George Soros, George Soros, Open Society's Foundation, George Soros. But this guy, Neville Roy Singham, this is a new name. This is a new character. This is a new villain. And we want to get to know Neville Roy Singham because his influence cannot be understated. To that end, today, it has become evident, and we have evidence to show you on the Liz Wheeler Show today, that the illegal alien riots, which, as we speak, are being exported to major cities, they're not grassroots, they're not organic, they're not peaceful, they are violent. Neville Roy Singham's hand in plotting these riots has been completely exposed by a newly unearthed communist pamphlet, and we have the receipts to show you today. This episode is proudly sponsored by All Family Pharmacy. Listen, you and I both know that the cost of healthcare in America is completely out of control. Prescription drugs are often way more expensive here than in almost any other country in the world. How is that fair? How has that been allowed to happen? Americans have been paying the highest drug prices in the world for far too long. We should not put up with this. Thankfully, it is starting to change. President Trump recently signed a new executive order to bring those prices down, and it is a step in the right direction, but it'll take a little bit of time for that to come to fruition. And while the system catches up, All Family Pharmacy is stepping up. They are not waiting around for policy to kick in. They are taking action to benefit you now. From now until June 30th, you can get 20% off all medications, no insurance required. We're talking real access to medications that have been known to be subject to gatekeeping by big pharma and big government, like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. They also have antibiotics, your daily maintenance meds, and more. We're talking over 200 different medications, and they ship fast, and they include a doctor's prescription in your shipment. Check them out. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz20 to claim your 20% off. They're also a company that is like-minded. They value you, and they value your medical freedom, and they are here to serve your needs. So get the meds you need, keep them on hand, take control of your health the way it should be. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz20 for 20% off today. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz20. So the illegal alien riots, the violent riots that we have been talking about for the past 2 days happening out in Los Angeles, are not staying contained to Los Angeles. They are being exported out of California into cities that are coming closer and closer to your neighborhood, your home, your family, your property. Last night, we saw in New York City these violent riots erupt. You can see the size and the scope of the riot. The mainstream media is doing the same thing they did 2 days ago. They are pretending that what we're seeing in New York City is a peaceful protest. They are lying when they say that these peaceful protesters are simply exercising their First Amendment rights. Well, that's not true. And fortunately, thanks to X, we have video to prove that these violent riots are, in fact, violent. We can show this on the screen, Spencer, while we talk. The first video shows clashes between these rioters and New York City police officers and ICE agents. You see them, these rioters attacking the vehicles right here on the screen of law enforcement. You can see it happening. The ICE agents or the police officers are chasing away rioters. Again, please note on the heads of these rioters, they are wearing masks, and not because they're afraid of passing germs. They are also wrapped in keffiyehs, the checkered neckerchief that has become the symbol of the pro-Hamas terrorism wing of the left, even here in the United States. That's what you see happening in front of your eyes right now. That was on the streets of New York last night. Then, of course, we can switch videos, Spencer, to the one that shows the protests from above. This was not a small protest. This was a large number of people. You can see these people lining the streets of New York City from this aerial view. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people that we see in New York City. And many of these people were engaging not just in peaceful protests, but in violence. They were breaking down barriers that law enforcement had erected to try to protect the city from these riots. We can play the third video here. This is the rioters breaking barriers. And the point of establishing, by the way, the reality of what we're seeing is because, first of all, reality is always king. We always need to know exactly what's happening, but we also need to understand that if the mainstream media wants us to look away from the violence, there's a reason they want us to look away from the violence. There's a reason they're lying to us. And there's a reason that these radical leftists are utilizing these terrorism tactics to try to impose their ideology on us. The result of this violence, thank goodness, was 80 of these rioters were arrested by law enforcement in New York City. But we have one rioter who was more courageous than the rest. And I say this tongue in cheek because this particular rioter had the courage to actually admit what the goal of these riots are. It's not about President Trump. It's not about anti-ICE sentiment. It's not about disagreeing with immigration policy. This riot is, as we stated Monday and reiterated yesterday, a revolutionary vanguard. It is the moment when the institutions that have been captured and the civil society, which has been compromised by Marxist thought and idea, is transferred into a takeover by Marxist forces of our government. What I mean by that, it's an overthrow. These are anti-Western civilization, anti-capitalist, anti-Americans who want communism to reign in the United States. And I don't say this because I'm inferring, I'm observing and telling you what I observe. I'm not inferring their ideology. They state it openly themselves, as this protester did when he said, from Mexico to Gaza, globalize the intifada. Take a listen to this. You can hear the whole group. From Mexico to Gaza, globalize the intifada. What does that mean? This is a war cry. This is a revolutionary, a cry to begin the revolution. This is jihadism. The word intifada, what does that mean? It means committing terror attacks against the West to destroy the West and instead impose a jihadi worldview on the world. This is what's happening in the streets of New York City right now. It's not a peaceful protest. It's not an exercise of free speech. It is a violent riot, and we know that it's not grassroots, it's not organic, it wasn't out in Los Angeles, and it's not in New York City. And that brings me to the smoking gun that I want to show you today. Outside of New York City, on the internet, there's a handout. This handout is a call to action for the groups that participated in staging these riots. This handout, this pamphlet, as you can plainly see what this is an invitation and an iteration of what groups are involved in staging these protests. This is what it says. It's a black and white poster. It says, ICE out of New York. Stop the deportations. Tuesday, June 10th, 5 p.m., Foley Square. Underneath that call to action are the logos of about 20 different groups that are involved in staging these protests. And these groups, the team here at the Liz Wheeler Show dug into these individual groups, and these groups are a veritable laundry list of radical leftist, communist, anti-American organizations that all point back to one person. They all point back to the money of Neville Roy Singham. We've talked for the last couple of days about Neville Singham. It turns out those closest to Neville Singham don't call him Neville. They call him by his middle name, Roy. He's known as Roy Singham to his family and his friends and his closest business associations, or his closest business associates. If you look at the laundry list of organizations listed on this pamphlet, you'll see the logo for the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. That's funded by Roy Singham. You'll see a logo for the People's Forum. The People's Forum is funded by Roy Singham to the tune of $20 million. You'll see down there at the bottom, second from the right, Code Pink. Code Pink is the organization founded by Roy Singham's wife, Jody Evans, this ostensibly anti-war group that was founded in 2003 to protest the Iraq War, but has shifted their priorities especially since being married to Roy Singham, to being an apologist for the Chinese Communist Party. You'll also see the Palestinian Youth Movement and their logo. That's on the bottom row as well, second from the left. The Palestinian Youth Movement also receives funding from Roy Singham. If you're starting to detect a pattern here, well, that pattern is extremely important. Up at the top, you'll see Defend Democracy in Brazil. What does that have to do with immigration policies in the United States? What does that have to do with Trump, you might be asking? What does that have to do with Roy Singham is the question you should be asking. Well, way back in 2023, 2 years ago, and we'll get to this New York Times expose on Roy Singham in just a moment. Suffice to say for the moment that the New York Times wrote an expose on Roy Singham back in 2023, and they talked about this group, Defend Democracy in Brazil. Now, of course, they're not talking about democracy in the sense that you and I talk about it, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Democracy is the word that they co-opted, the word that they try to redefine, the word that that doesn't mean democracy anymore. It means communism. It means Marxism. Well, Defend Democracy in Brazil might not have the same obvious monetary ties to Roy Singham. Maybe they do, and we just couldn't find it. But they do have an ideological tie to Roy Singham. On their Twitter account, on August 6th of 2023, in direct response to the journalist who wrote the expose for the New York Times on Roy Singham, Defend Democracy in Brazil said, "What an utterly piece of crap, this article. As vague as a cloud, what are Chinese government talking points anyway? Do you even know it? Wish there were more activists like those who fund political education so we arrive at the world that we want. #love socialism." So what are they saying? Activists like those who fund serious political education, they are, of course, referring to Roy Singham. Now, many of these groups don't have official business structures, which means it's just about impossible to find out who funds them. They're also funded largely by dark money. Dark money, the way dark money works is if you set up a nonprofit can receive money from anybody. That nonprofit can then give money to anybody, and it's dark money because they don't have to disclose exactly who their donors are. And that's how Roy Singham works. That was what Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about when she was talking about the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund. It's a way of disguising what you're doing with your money. That's why it's called dark money. And there's been a little bit of a reversal in American politics. It used to be Republicans who were against, or it used to be Democrats who were against dark money. Republicans, they say, "Oh, the Koch network. We want to know exactly what that money's being used for." And Republicans were like, money's free speech. Now there's been somewhat of a role reversal here. It's Democrats that are taking advantage of the dark money political structure to fund their radical leftist projects, and Republicans are saying we need transparency, we need to expose this, we cannot have dark money, we cannot allow so-called dark money, which is really money from an individual like Roy Singham, to fund crimes being committed against the American people. So as you can see, it wasn't just a coordinated, pre-planned plot to to impose political violence on the people of Los Angeles. This is being exported to New York City, and this communist pamphlet shows the organizations involved in staging these riots, and it is a veritable laundry list of radical leftist communist organizations that all point back, or many of which point back, to Roy Singham and his money. So that brings us to this New York Times article in 2023, which, by the way, on yesterday's show, when we mentioned that then Senator Marco Rubio had requested Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland to investigate Roy Singham for violations of the FARA Act. Merrick Garland, of course, didn't do that. Rubio made that request of Biden's Attorney General to investigate Singham because of the reporting in this New York Times article from 2023, which we're going to get into here in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about crowd health. Health insurance is the worst. As you know, my family and I quit our health insurance last year. It was kind of a scary thing to do, calling up our health insurance and saying, you suck, we quit. But health insurance is confusing for all of us. It's expensive. It's frustrating because it doesn't do what it says it does. Claim denials are not an isolated experience that you are having. Claim denials are becoming the rule. They're more and more common. 1 in 5 Obamacare claims were denied just last year, which from where I sit is unacceptable. What are we paying for if we pay these astronomical fees for health insurance and then they don't cover when we submit a claim? Well, that's why Crowd Health is so amazing. I switched my entire family to Crowd Health. It's not health insurance. It is a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. I call it assurance because it still gives you the peace of mind that you're not going to be stuck with astronomical bills from medical events. But here's how it works. You sign up, you join the crowd, you have a medical expense, and you submit it through their app, and it gets funded by the crowd. Hence why they call it crowdfunding. You're good to go then. You can compare the price of how much this costs you to buy into the crowd for just $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more. Compare that to your monthly health insurance premiums. You get access to a community of people who are willing to help you in the event of an emergency. It also means access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more. And that's all without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you and like me and my family who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. Use promo code Liz. Crowd Health is not insurance. I like to call it assurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Use promo code Liz. Okay. Journey back with me to 2023. It seems like a long time ago now, even though this was 2 years ago. In 2023, the New York Times did an expose titled How a U.S. Tech Mogul Used Nonprofits to Sow Chinese Propaganda, which is a great article. It's funny how even though this expose happened, it flew under the radar, if you will. Maybe Senator Marco Rubio was the only one that said, whoa, wait a second here. This guy, you'll see him on the screen. That's Roy Singham, as he's known to his friends, standing with his now wife, Jody Evans, the founder of Code Pink. It's funny how this man has so much influence in the United States, so much influence in directing the actions, the strategy, the tactics of the radical left. And yet, for many of us, his name is, we're just now becoming familiar with his name. He's a communist. He is a self-avowed communist, and we're going to get into a little bit of his history because he has a very interesting phrase he uses when he's asked about sowing Chinese propaganda. He denies it, of course, but the phrase that he uses to deny it tells you almost everything you need to know about this guy. Before we get to his specific denial, I want to paint a picture of what his life looks like. He's hiding out in China, and understand that if you are a foreign national, meaning if you are not a citizen of the People's Republic of China, you don't get to stay there long term. They might allow you to visit once in a while, especially if it's to an area that they think will propagandize you in communism, but you don't get to live long term in China unless you get special permission from the Chinese Communist Party. So the fact that Roy Singham lives in Shanghai and has an office in Shanghai tells you that he is able to live in Shanghai and conduct business in China because the Chinese Communist Party gave him special permission. Now, why would they do that? They don't just extend that kind of permission to anybody. They're not loose with their immigration policies like Joe Biden was with ours. The reason that Roy Singham was given this special permission will become very evident in just a moment. According to the New York Times article published in 2023, Mr. Singham's office, adorned in red and yellow, sits on the 18th floor of Shanghai's swanky Times Square. A visit shows that he is not alone. He shares the office with a Chinese media company called Maku Group. We talked about this group yesterday on the show, you'll recall, which says its goal is to, quote, tell China's story well, a term commonly used for foreign propaganda. Again, we covered this on the show yesterday. Just last month, the New York Times reports Mr. Singham attended a Chinese Communist Party propaganda forum. When they say just last month, that was back in 2023. In a photo taken during a breakout session on how to promote the party, they mean the Chinese Communist Party, abroad, Mr. Singham is seen jotting in a notebook adorned with a red hammer and sickle. Suffice to say, those examples alone paint a picture of just who Roy Singham is and what he's doing in China and why the Chinese Communist Party has given him special permission to live and conduct his business in China, because he is doing the work of the Chinese Communist Party. And again, we're going to get to his denial in a moment about being controlled by the Chinese government or being paid by the Chinese government. But you can also see, perhaps more clearly in his wife even than in Roy Singham himself, because Roy Singham has long been a communist, Jody Evans, the founder of Code Pink, radically changed her views on China after marrying Roy Singham. This is what the Times reports. Ms. Evans has organized around progressive causes like climate change, gender, and racism. Until a few years ago, she readily criticized China's authoritarian government. This is what she wrote on what was then Twitter in 2015. We demand China stop brutal repression of their women's human rights defenders. She posted on Instagram a photo with the Chinese dissident IYY. Since 2017, the New York Times reports, about a quarter of Code Pink's donations, totaling more than 1.4 million, have come from two groups linked to Mr. Singham, nonprofit records show. The first was one of the UPS store nonprofits. When they refer to the UPS store nonprofits, Mr. Singham registers nonprofits. The nonprofits associated with Mr. Singham, to be perfectly accurate here, are registered address-wise with UPS store mailboxes that you can rent. That's what the New York Times means when they say the UPS store nonprofits. It's an attempt to disguise who's associated with these nonprofits. The Times goes on to say the second was a charity that Goldman Sachs offers as a conduit for clients' giving and that Mr. Singham has used in the past. Miss Evans now stridently supports China. She casts it as a defender of the oppressed and a model for economic growth without slavery or war. Quote, if the U.S. crushes China, Jody Evans said in 2021, it would cut off hope for the human race and life on Earth. Well, if that doesn't sound like Chinese communist propaganda, I don't know what does. The Times says she describes the Uyghurs as terrorists and defends their mass detention. We have to do something, she said in 2021. In a recent YouTube video chat, she was asked if she has anything negative to say about China, and she said that she can't think of anything. Now, here's the interesting part of the New York Times expose on Roy Singham and Jody Evans. It seems that the level of influence and the amount of money spent by Roy Singham given to these violent revolutionary communist groups that are committing violence here in the United States is an open secret among people who are radical leftist activists on the left. And yet, the reason that Roy Singham isn't discussed more openly, this is what the Times writes. Few on the American political left would discuss the couple publicly, fearing lawsuits or harassment. Fearing lawsuits or harassment. I want to know more about that. What are the tactics that Roy Singham uses when people in his sphere criticize him? What kind of lawsuits does he file? And what kind of harassment are we talking about? If you or anyone you know has ever been subject to lawfare by Roy Singham or has ever experienced harassment by Roy Singham or any of his associated groups, please reach out to us and let us know. I want to know more about what they're talking about. So interestingly, This New York Times expose on Roy Singham was written in 2023, but this was not the first time Roy Singham had been reported as being one of the primary funders of these violent revolutionary groups on the ground here in the United States. As early as 2021, there were online anonymous accounts on what was then Twitter exposing his funding of these radical leftist groups. You can see this thread right here on the screen. It's from an account called Fash Busters. And this thread is a comprehensive walk through exactly how Roy Singham and his money gets disseminated. Roy Singham's money gets disseminated to these violent revolutionary groups on the ground here in the United States. And yet, of course, the New York Times gives them zero credit for reporting all of what the New York Times reports second after it was reported online by these anonymous Twitter accounts. Just a funny little character illustration of the New York Times here. Great expose on Roy Singham, but can't bring themselves to say that they weren't the first to do this reporting. So then, of course, we get to this denial from Roy Singham. We said on the show this week, you know, he's a mouthpiece of the CCP. He's made his money by being a propagandist for the CCP. Let's be extremely precise here about how this works. This is what Roy Singham says when he faces these allegations. Specifically, this is what he wrote in an email to the New York Times before they published this piece about his association with the Chinese Communist Party and his funding of these radical groups here in the United States. He said, quote, "I categorically deny and repudiate any suggestion that I am a member of, work for, take orders from, or follow instructions of any political party or government or their representatives. I am solely guided by my beliefs, which are my long-held personal views." Okay, two things. First of all, he doesn't deny getting paid by or profiting from the Chinese Communist Party. That seems to be the glaring omission in this denial. But the other thing that stuck out at me that I think is extremely pertinent to understanding this villain of the left, the man who gives the money to these violent, revolutionary, openly communist groups that commit crimes against the American people, is this sentence. He says, "I am solely guided by my beliefs, which are long-held personal views." In that sentence, he's actually telling the truth. He is and has been since at least the 1970s a diehard communist, a self-admitted Marxist. And we're going to show you exactly where Roy Singham's values came from and who he's passing them down to in just a moment. We're talking, who is Roy Singham's father? An interesting character. Who is Roy Singham's son, and what work is he doing? And how exactly does the Chinese Communist Party give money to Roy Singham without it being a direct payment for propagandizing on their behalf? We're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to talk about Joe Biden for a second, another man who's compromised by the CCP. Maybe that's why Joe Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland refused to look into Roy Singham, because if you think Roy Singham is influential and compromised by the CCP, well, so is Hunter Biden. So is Joe Biden. Let me not get off on a tangent here. Joe Biden, when he was in office, regardless of whether it was him or Anthony Bernal, Jill Biden's gay sidekick who controlled the auto pen reportedly, the destructive nature of the policies that came from the Biden White House are still harming us today. You can't undo that in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. It will be undone. But there's a lesson that we need to learn when we think about the inflation that came from the Biden administration. They devalued our dollar by spending our money, printing it, giving it to Zelensky overseas, which is bad enough. But it showed us their strategy. These politicians, in order to control us, yes, they are infiltrating our institutions. They are compromising our civil society, but they're also looking to control us using our money. That's why they want to use a digital dollar. It's not just, the convenience of doing away with fiat currency and conducting all your financial transactions on your phone. No. They want to be able to control what you pay for and deny you purchasing what they don't want you to pay for, or punish you, penalize you, fine you for saying certain things, or maybe even reward you for saying certain things. It is a mechanism of control. And it is why today it has never been more important than for you to take control over your wealth so that this doesn't happen to you. Do not let your life savings become a casualty of anything, failing banks, currency wars, or these controlling politicians. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts, by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I did this. A portion of our wealth portfolio is now in physical precious metals, and it gives me the security, the peace of mind to know that these politicians who admit that they hate me cannot use my money to control me. American Hartford Gold is a fabulous company. They support content like this. They stand with us because we are committed to the truth. So tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them right now. Click the link in the description of this episode or call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Okay, so I want to be really precise here about Roy Singham and his denial of being controlled by the CCP, because there's some important things to say here. Okay, so he categorically denies and repudiates any suggestion that he's a member of, works for, takes orders from, or follows instructions of any political party or government or their representatives. No denial of receiving money or benefiting financially from association with the Chinese Communist Party, which is probably the most important part that he doesn't deny. But then he says, I am solely guided by my beliefs, which are my long-held personal views. That, at least, is true. That part's true. And we'll get to his father and his son and the Marxist think tank that his son works for and who funds it in just a second. But I also want to say that when you are paying someone off, when you're talking about money laundering or the commission of something illegal or unethical, you don't often write a check for that and then write in the subject line, I'm paying someone off. Why? Because it makes it too easy to follow the money trail. So what happens is either dark money groups, that's how Roy Singham disseminates his money to these radical, violent, revolutionary groups here on the ground in the United States, or when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, they don't allow anyone, just anyone, to do business in China. Do you think if you walked into Shanghai and you said, I want to start a business here, do you think the Chinese Communist Party would let you do that? Do you think you're just allowed to start trading, on the stock market in China? No, the Chinese Communist Party is not a free market economy. They have used elements of free market capitalism to benefit themselves, but every significant business in China, especially corporations, have to do the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. And if they dissent at all from the Chinese Communist Party, they're penalized, they are put out of business. Remember the story of Jack Ma. All that being said, if you are given access to the Chinese market as an investor, that is a favor the Chinese Communist Party is granting to you intentionally. It is their way of giving you money without writing you a check and saying, I'm paying Roy Singham for Chinese communist propaganda around the world. So, to that end, the Indian news outlet Business Today reported a couple of years ago that Singham is, quote, invested in two companies in China's consultancy and food industries, namely Shanghai, Lu Weixing, and Gondwa Foods. He is also listed as a legal representative of Shanghai Shinong Company Limited. What does this tell us? This tells us that Roy Singham is profiting because the Chinese Communist Party is letting him. This is the way the Chinese Communist Party pays people. They don't write it in the subject line of the check. They give people access to doing business in China or investing in companies that, what does it mean when you invest? Put a little money in, you get a lot of money back. And the Chinese Communist Party is saying, Roy, you want money? This is where you go to get it. And that's the way that they're paying him for what he's doing. Now, there may be more direct payments, but even if there's not, this is how mouthpieces for Chinese propaganda are paid. So his denial, first of all, he didn't even deny that the Chinese Communist Party was paying him. So maybe there is a check. Maybe we're going to see a 10% for the big guy moment for Roy Singham. We'll have to see. Each day, we are finding out more about Roy Singham and how he uses his money to fund these violent riots on the streets of the United States of America. But the other comment that Roy Singham made about his long-held personal views, this is true. Roy Singham has long been a communist. It's not just that his office in Shanghai is adorned in red and yellow. It's not just that he's jotting down notes on how to propagandize communism abroad in a red notebook with a hammer and sickle on it. It's not just that he called the workers at his tech company comrades. And by the way, I want to be even more specific and accurate. Yesterday, we talked about him being a billionaire because he was paid by the Chinese Communist Party. The first huge amount of money that Roy Singham made was because he founded a tech company, and he sold that tech company for like $750 million. And then he's using that money to do all of his violent revolutionary work. He's using that money ostensibly to invest in the Chinese communist economy because they're letting him do so because he's propagandizing for them. But long before he started his tech company, Roy Singham was involved in a group called the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. This is all the way back in the 1970s. The League of Revolutionary Black Workers is exactly what it sounds like. It's black communists. It's black communists that are seeking to overthrow Western civilization and overthrow capitalism. And Roy Singham not only was involved in that, years and years later, decades later, actually just a couple years ago, back in 2021, Roy Singham himself, and we're going to bring this up on the screen, it's already up there, he penned a tribute to a Leninist leader of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, a man by the name of General Baker. Now, you can read this entire article if you want, this entire tribute to this Leninist communist leader of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. We'll post the link to this entire work, this entire letter, this entire tribute on social media. But suffice to say, included in what Roy Singham writes on this webpage is an admission that he was part of the party. The party. You know what the party means. That means the Communist Party. He was part of the party. This is one of his quotes. Eventually, being in the party center and then on the central committee meant I did not break discipline on seeing people who had left, nor did I reach out to people when I left. Understand what he's saying there. He's not only admitting that he was part of the Communist Party, that he was on the central committee of a communist party in the United States, but they have a rule about not talking to people who repudiate communism and leave. And he said he did not break discipline on seeing people who had left the party. And when he left, he did not reach out to the people that he left behind. Now, he writes in this letter, this tribute to this Leninist General Baker, he writes to certain people that he's sorry that they never got a chance to meet General Baker. And one of the quotes he includes, one of the quotes from General Baker that he includes, is a quote about taking down capitalism. As you can see, in Roy Singham's own words, he is a communist. He is a Leninist. He is a Marxist. This man is anti-capitalist, anti-America, anti-Western civilization entirely, and he has been for a long time. And someone who has worked closely with him, someone we'll get to in just a moment, his son currently works for him, but a close associate of Roy Singham said that Roy Singham was largely informed in his political philosophy by his father. Who is Roy Singham's father? I know a lot of this is convoluted. There's a lot that goes into the makeup of who someone is. What's nature? What's nurture? Did you learn this from your family? Did you learn this through the education system? Did you learn this because you got involved in a communist party? Well, Archibald Singham was a political activist who was closely tied to the Cuban Revolution. Now, Archibald Singham himself is Sri Lankan. You might notice his appearance in some of these photos. Roy Singham's father was Sri Lankan. Archibald was Sri Lankan, and his mother was Cuban. But Archibald, the Sri Lankan immigrant, was closely tied to the Cuban Revolution and was in favor of Cuban communism. So was Archibald Singham, father of Roy Singham, a communist? I think it's a fairly safe inference to say it appears that he was. And this individual, Vijay Prashad, who runs a Marxist think tank called Tricontinental. Now, this Marxist think tank called Tricontinental is funded by Roy Singham. And this Marxist think tank called Tricontinental, funded by Roy Singham, employs Roy's son, Nate Singham. Nate Singham works in Brazil for Tricontinental. He's also, Nate, the son, has also written posts for a communist blog advocating for communist policies like universal basic income. But the man in charge of Tricontinental wrote extensively about Roy Singham in a thread on X, which I want to bring up because what he says about Roy Singham is extremely pertinent. Vijay Prashad says, there, and this is, by the way, back in December of 2021. He said, there's a morbid fascination with the sources of funds for Tricontinental. It's a Marxist think tank. Of course, there'd be curiosity about who's funding this. That is what I can say. We have a team of about 70 people spread out over 15 countries. That requires resources. Nothing like we have done can be built without funds. Nothing like we have done can be built without funds. Then he says, years ago, I met Roy Singham, the son of Archie Singham. Roy's worldview had been formed in part by his parents, but also by his struggle in the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. And Vijay Prashad links to that letter that Roy Singham wrote that we referenced a moment ago, where he's talking about the Leninist General Baker. Vijay Prashad says, fortuitously, Roy built a remarkable software company, which is when I first met him, a Marxist with a massive software company. He sold that company a few years ago and decided to give away all the money toward political education for a new generation of radicals. Those funds, now largely in nonprofits, were the original source for Tricontinental's endowment and other projects, which we hope will last for at least a generation. We are building on Archie's legacy, that unique intellectual who accompanied movements of social liberation. So if this thread doesn't answer the question of, oh, is Roy Singham's father a communist? Well, yes, he is. Is this Marxist think tank funded by Roy Singham? Well, yes, it is. Does this Marxist think tank funded by Roy Singham employ Roy Singham's son, Nate Singham? Yes, it does. Then I don't know what kind of other confirmation we could need. Suffice to say, the purpose of going down deep in this rabbit hole is not just because it's interesting. It's because when you follow the money, you find out what the motivation is for what we're seeing in our cities. We find out not just who's funding the protest, but who the man giving the money is and what the ideology of the man giving the money to the groups organizing the violent riots in streets across the country, in Los Angeles and now in New York City, and probably soon in a city by you. When Roy Singham denies taking direction from the Chinese Communist Party, he doesn't deny taking money, and he says that he is directed only by his long-held personal views. Well, yeah, those long-held personal views just happen coincidentally to be in perfect alignment with Chinese communism, because Roy Singham is a self-avowed communist Marxist, and he puts his money where his mouth is. Again, circling back to where we began at the beginning of this show, kudos to members of Congress, whether it's Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna or Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene or now Senator Josh Hawley. Kudos for members of Congress recognizing that these are not peaceful protests. These are not peaceful protests that just got out of control and led to some fringe elements committing violence. These are violent, revolutionary communist groups that intend to commit violence because they want to tear down Western civilization. They want to destroy capitalism. They want to destroy the United States of America and instead impose their Marxist worldview, something that might mirror the Chinese Communist Party's worldview, on you and your family. That's why that pamphlet, that handout that you can see on the screen, the People's Forum, which received $20 million via Roy Singham, you see the list of 20 organizations that are part of staging this violence in New York City. And it matters that this money, that many of these organizations have ties to money that comes from Roy Singham. It matters because it proves to you, it should even prove to people in the center and on the left who aren't communists themselves what is actually happening before our very eyes. Again, I challenge you to do what you did yesterday, to do what you did on Monday, take this episode and send it to your member of Congress. Share it on your social media account. Share it on X. Share it on Facebook. Post it in your Instagram story. Tag your member of Congress if you need to. Email them, call them, raise your voice. We are in a unique situation in political history where we are called to take an active role in the minute-by-minute rapid response, if you want to call it that, to the radical left's attempted takedown of everything that we hold dear. They hate you. They hate America. They want to destroy us. And this is how they're doing it. All right, I promised yesterday, and we are going to get to this today. I promised yesterday that we would talk a little bit about the Elon Musk versus Donald Trump feud. What's going on with that? We were off air the day that it happened last week, so we didn't get to do the hot take on it. You know, I'm not really big into hot takes anyway. I kind of sat back and watched what was going on X when Elon Musk was posting first against the big beautiful bill, and then when that didn't get as much traction as he had hoped, then he was posting against Donald Trump specifically, accusing Trump of really absurd things like being on the Epstein list. And what is my take on this whole thing? Well, first of all, one of the funniest days ever on X, like the memes you guys were making. I basically just spent the whole evening sending memes to my husband back and forth because they were so funny. And my philosophy on moments like this is wait and see. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are two very powerful individuals, and powerful individuals need to debate big ideas. Now, maybe Elon Musk didn't debate it in the way that you would have preferred that he debate this, but the actual meat of the debate, if you take the ridiculous allegations that Trump's on the Epstein list, which is patently untrue, I'm pretty sure Elon knows that, or I suspect Elon knows that. He was just posting that for attention, which is why he later deleted it, and then today said he apologized for some of the things that he posted. The meat of this debate actually is a debate we need to have, because Elon Musk is not wrong when he says that the amount of debt in our country is an existential threat to our country. He's actually right on principle when it comes to fiscal conservatism. Even Republicans, even Donald Trump, are not exactly fiscally conservative anymore. In fact, both parties are kind of uniparty about spending. And Elon Musk is right. What is going to happen to our country if we do not stop the amount of spending that we're spending? So he's right on principle on that. But the reason that he's not right about the big beautiful bill is not because the big beautiful bill is perfect. It's not. There's a lot of dumb things in it. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene brought up a part about AI regulation. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff in the big beautiful bill. And the reason there's a lot of bad stuff in the big beautiful bill is because there's a lot of bad people in Congress, in both parties. If we continue to send these rhino Republicans to Congress, then we're going to get bills that suck. Or we're going to get elements in good bills, and the elements of those good bills are going to suck. Unless we clean house in Congress and actually send based representatives, we're never going to see the level of policy that we want reflected in those bills, because the people that we send to represent us aren't actually representing our values. So all of that being said, the reason that Elon Musk is not correct about torpedoing the big beautiful bill, the reason that the amount of spending in the big beautiful bill is necessary, is exemplified by what we've been talking about all week. Look at these riots in LA. Look at these riots that are now exported to New York City and to Dallas. And I think there was one in Detroit. What are we seeing? We're seeing an existential battle for our country. And in order to carry out mass deportations, in order to heal our nation from the wounds inflicted by the Joe Biden administration and the Barack Obama administration before that, unfortunately, we have to spend money to clean up that problem. So if you just did what Elon Musk originally suggested, and you took a chainsaw, and you cut all the spending, then we wouldn't be able to deport these people. We know today that some of the individuals in LA who were hurling rocks and assaulting cops are illegal aliens. We have to have the money to deport them. Fiscal responsibility is absolutely critical. Elon Musk is correct. But fiscal responsibility only matters if you have a country. And we won't have a country unless we take care of this battle that's happening on our streets. And in order to clean up this battle, 20 million illegal aliens that could be here? We don't even know the number. That takes money. And perhaps, listen, one of the good things about Elon Musk and about Donald Trump, One of the good things, and Donald Trump, by the way, handled himself beautifully during this entire interaction with Elon Musk over the past couple days. But one of the good things about both of them is they get over things pretty quickly. Like Elon Musk is already like posting a red heart in response to Trump. It seemed to me that it was just a little bit of what the kids call shit posting online, at least when it came from Elon Musk. So I'm not entirely concerned about it. Go ahead, have this debate. It at least, at the very least, even if it's not what I would have done if I'm Elon, it at the very least brought to the forefront this debate over pure principle and pragmatic practicality. And it's an important debate to have. It's kind of like, I was actually comparing it to some friends who had texted me about it last week. I said, well, listen, think about two of the founding geniuses of our country, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They joined forces and were like the inseparable duo when they crafted the Declaration of Independence. Had it not been for Thomas Jefferson's beautiful words and John Adams' stubbornness, we might not have declared independence. We might not have convinced the Continental Congress to vote in favor of independence from the tyrannical British crown. And yet after that, after they achieved that together, what happened? They spent the next 50 years hating each other. And they hated each other because they were so married to their ideology. They had such passion and love of country that they were convinced they were right. That's what happens when you have two leaders in one space. They're very convinced that they're right. And sometimes they're not in alignment on everything. So I'm not terribly concerned about it. I think everything's going to be okay. I know that this is a week late in my take on this, but this was actually my take on the first day. And I thought about bringing up the text messages. A lot of people reached out to me that day and they're like, what's happening? The great breakup between Elon and Trump. And this is essentially what my opinion was right off the bat too. We just didn't get to talk about it until today because we had communists funding revolutionary riots in our country to expose first. Okay, we also have another riot, or they're calling it a protest. A peaceful protest is what they want to tell you. That's about to happen on the 14th. That would be Flag Day, and it's also Trump's birthday. And this protest is called No King's Day. We're going to talk about just who's behind that, if you can stomach more following the money, in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about a sponsor who I treasure, a sponsor who I know you value as well, and that's Preborn. We've talked about multiple times on this show a recent bombshell report that revealed that the abortion pill is literally 10 times more dangerous than the FDA claims it is. In fact, 11% of women who take the abortion pill experience serious adverse effects. I think the FDA claimed it was less than 1% of women. So they're a liar by a factor of 10. Horrifyingly, the abortion pill accounts for over 60% of abortions in our country. And with an average of over 1 million babies aborted annually in the United States, if you do the math, that's 66,000 women who will be seriously harmed by the abortion pill this year. And this is what they tell us is women's healthcare. Let me tell you what real healthcare looks like. Preborn network of clinics saved over 67,000 babies last year. Preborn not only provides for the physical and emotional needs of mothers, but also shares hope for the soul through God's love in the gospel. Once a woman sees her baby on an ultrasound screen and hears the heartbeat, her baby's chance at life doubles. So it seems obvious to say ultrasounds in pregnancy clinics are critically important. One ultrasound only costs $28, and $140 helps to rescue 5 babies. Any gift will help. All gifts are tax deductible. To donate, simply dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. Okay, so the peaceful protests that we're about to see on June 14th, and by the way, the date that they chose for these protests is not a coincidence. This is both Flag Day, the day we honor Old Glory, the red, white, and blue. It's also President Trump's birthday, and he's planning a big birthday bash. And it's going to be America themed. So, of course, the left hates Trump. They hate you. They hate America. They hate the flag. So they're protesting on June 14th, and they're calling their protest No King's Day. If I were Trump, I would be tickled to death by No King's Day. I feel like I would co-opt it the way that the American rebels did with Yankee Doodle. Yankee Doodle was originally a song that the British sang to make fun of the Yankees, the Americans. And the American Rebels co-opted it, and now it's a song we teach all of our children, like Pride in America, Yankee Doodle. That's what I would do if I were Trump with no King's Day. I'd be like, yeah, no King's Day. Thank you for giving me this day on my birthday. The no King's Day protests, we'll have to see if they're violent or not. I think it's going to be 50-50. I think it's a 50-50 chance that it's violent or not. I think that originally they were planned to be riots. I think originally there was violence and agitation that was planned. However, given the fact that we have so thoroughly exposed who is behind and who is funding and the reality of the violent riots in LA and in New York City, we've traced it back to the communists funding it. And, thanks to X, we can all see with our eyes. We're not stupid. We understand what we're looking at. We see that this is violent, and most of the American people do not support that. I think that given that, there's a 50-50 chance that these protests on No King's Day on Saturday might not actually be violent. We'll have to see. But it is important, and I promise to do this quickly, it is important to note who's behind this protest. It's not organic again. It's not grassroots. It's largely funded by the teachers' unions. Randy Weingarten. You might remember Randy Weingarten because there's a chapter on her in this book. If you haven't gotten this book, Hide Your Children, exposing the Marxists behind the attack on America's kids. Well, I may be somewhat biased given the fact that I wrote it, but you should get it. You should read about Randy Weingarten. She and her cronies at the teachers' unions, they're behind these protests, as is Walmart heiress Christy Walton. That one surprised me. We will be doing a deeper dive on her in a later show, but suffice to say, we need to understand that she is involved. The group that's officially planning these protests on June 14th is a group called Indivisible, and Indivisible has received $7 million in funds from George Soros. That's a name that's a name we're all familiar with. And so as you can see, not grassroots, not organic. This is a coordinated protest, might be a riot. We'll have to see. Planned for June 14th. As I said, we will be doing a deeper dive into the planning that went into that rally, but not today. Today, we are out of time. Sunday, the day after No King's Day, is Father's Day, by the way. And if you are still unsure what you're going to get your father, your husband, your son, your brother, the father in your life, well, don't worry. I haven't gotten my dad anything, and I haven't gotten my husband anything yet either. I do think I got something little for my father-in-law, but let's just say I have a little shopping still to do. If you're in the same boat, don't worry. I have an idea for you. You can forget the gadgets that your dad probably has a billion gorilla gadgets or coffee mugs. What your husband really wants is something that speaks to who he is. What I mean is, in a world that mocks his masculinity, mocks his traditional values, and even his fatherhood, he needs a place that still has his back. That's where Blaze TV comes in. It's where unapologetic conservative voices call out that poison and stand up for what's right, his faith, his family, and his freedom. Right now, you can grab our Father's Day special, $30 off an annual subscription when you use the code DAD30. It's good for this week only. It's fast, easy. You don't have to wrap it, and it actually means something. So if you're still giftless like I am, this is your moment to win Father's Day. Think of it as peace of mind. Think of it as firepower for his convictions. Skip those predictable gifts. I tell you, they're not that good. This Father's Day, give him something that actually matters. Go to blazetv.com/Liz. Use code DAD30 to grab the deal and remind him he is not alone. All right. Make sure you send this episode to your member of Congress and share this episode on all your social media platforms, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. Make sure you're subscribed to the show because the exposés will continue on who is plotting the takedown of America. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.